My sister and I were born mortal enemies. Even as wandering souls waiting to be reborn, we couldn't stand each other. She was supposed to be my twin, but sharing was never in her nature. Instead of accepting that we were meant to arrive together, she decided she wanted the stage all to herself. So she kicked me out of our destined womb and snatched the better deal for herself, the golden ticket into the richest family in New York. In her mind, victory was already hers. What she didn't know was that her so-called perfect family was a ticking time bomb. The billionaire father was obsessed with his wife to the point of delusion. The mother, sweet but hopelessly naive, floated through life like a child. And the adopted older brother, a cold, brilliant sociopath who hid his madness behind an angelic face. In the end, that charming monster broke my sister piece by piece until she couldn't even stand again. Literally, she lost the use of her legs. As for me, I ended up with a washed-up actress for a mother, a woman who never quite made it in Hollywood. Yet, against all odds, she clawed her way back to fame, dragging me with her. I went from forgotten child star to national treasure. My sister, devoured by jealousy, showed up at my awards ceremony with a bomb strapped to her chest. She blew us both into oblivion right there in front of the cameras. That was how I died in the spotlight. And when I opened my eyes again, everything had changed. This time, she had stolen my place. She'd forced her way into my mother's womb, sneering. Now it's my turn to be loved, adored, and worshipped. I laughed loud and unrestrained. She had no idea that I'd returned with an advantage, a hidden skill designed for survival. The foster brother she once feared, I could turn him into my puppet. The glamorous actress she idolized, that woman was far from perfect. She was the real demon behind the mask. My dear sister smirked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Enjoy being the new family freak? Before I could answer, she shoved me toward the underworld's gate and dove straight for the mirror that showed my mother's pregnant reflection. I grabbed the edge of the mirror just in time, clinging on with everything I had from his dark throne. The young ruler of the underworld, Killian Draven, watched with lazy amusement. "Is she always this dramatic?" he asked, his tone half mocking, half curious. Rumor had it that our reincarnations weren't normal. Killian was running an experiment, giving a few chosen souls the power to select their next lives. Naturally, my sister ignored all explanations. Before Killian could finish speaking, she kicked me again and dove straight into the body of the billionaire's wife. "I'm done being her sister. She doesn't deserve me," she shouted. Killian had to improvise on the spot, splitting the experiment into two separate paths. Neither of us heard his final words that day, but I always had the feeling we missed something important. Now, hanging on the mirror's edge, I saw him smirk. "You're sharper than she is," he said, resting his chin on his hand. "So I'll tell you what she never learned." In that moment, everything clicked. He had added two hidden conditions to his experiment. First, each of us would have the power for people to hear our thoughts. Not spoken words, but the quiet voices inside our minds. Second, we've been granted unnatural beauty, the kind that could bend destinies and ruin empires. He wanted to see what we would do with those gifts. Would we use them to rise or destroy ourselves? Of course, back then we had no idea. Looking back, it's obvious what happened. My sister must have realized too late how twisted her new family was and began mocking them in her mind. But they heard everything, every cruel thought, every insult. No wonder they turned on her. No wonder the obsessed brother lost his mind and dragged her into ruin. As for me, my unnatural beauty became my mother's obsession. She molded me into perfection, polishing me until there was nothing left but her idea of fame. But the spotlight was a cage and she was the jailer. I gazed at the mirror again at the actress's swollen belly and smiled. "Congratulations, sis," I whispered. "You just signed up for my personal nightmare. But this time, I wouldn't lose. This time, I'd use my gift from the very beginning. Even from inside the womb if I had to, that cursed family would adore me, protect me, and fight for me." I glanced at the king of hell one last time and whispered, "Thank you, my lord." Then I released my grip. I plunged straight into the womb of the billionaire's wife. And just as my soul slipped into her body, I heard a terrified voice shouting in the delivery room, "What? The umbilical cord is wrapped around her neck. A C-section could kill my wife." Inside the delivery room, chaos reigned. Leonard Gardner, the wealthiest man in the country, was losing his mind. His shouts echoed through the sterile hallways, raw with panic. Do something. Save my wife, not the baby. If anything happens to her, I'll have this entire hospital shut down. Meanwhile, floating in the warmth of the womb, I let out a long sigh. So, this is my billionaire father, huh? Overbearing, loud, and hopelessly obsessed with my mother. How romantic. Mom really did win the jackpot with this one. Then, as if the world itself hit pause, the shouting stopped. The staff froze. Leonard and my mother staring at each other like someone had pressed mute on their breakdowns. A slow grin tugged at my lips. Bingo. They heard me. The heart voice skill worked. And even better, I had full control. I could choose who heard what and when. Back in our previous lives, my sister had the same ability, but she never learned how to control it. Every mean, jealous, or impulsive thought she had blasted out of her head like a megaphone. So, when she heard Leonard's desperate shout, "Save my wife, not the child," she snapped right there in the womb. What kind of idiot says that? Playing the doting husband for show? Please, I bet he's got another family somewhere already. Her angry thoughts filled the room like poison gas. Judy Gardner, my mother, was already terrified, her emotions swinging wildly. Hearing that pushed her right over the edge. Her heart rate spiked, her breaths turned shallow, and Leonard dropped to his knees beside her bed, promising eternal love and devotion just to calm her down. Then came the delivery. The baby, my sister, was born. And Leonard, he didn't even look at her. He held his wife close, trembling like a man who'd seen death and barely escaped. "My love, you scared me half to death," he whispered, and my sister's mind went off again. "Oh, of course, forget your newborn daughter. Keep worshipping your wife, you spineless fraud, and that wrinkled old woman still thinks she's your one and only? What a joke." The moment those words reached him, Leonard's expression turned to ice. He told the nurses to take the baby away. His wife, still trembling, became convinced the child was cursed, a reincarnated mistress sent to steal her husband away. That's how my sister's life began, hated before she'd even taken her first breath. But this time, I was rewriting the story. This time, I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to be adored, protected, and treated like the treasure they never knew they needed, winning over a lovesick billionaire and his fragile wife. Please, I was made for this game. I activated the heart voice skill again. Why are Daddy and Mommy crying because of me? I don't want them to cry. I'll be strong for them. I wiggled slightly in the warm fluid, feeling the cord tight around my neck. With the focus of a surgeon, I reached up with my tiny hands and began to loosen it. One loop, then another. Slowly, carefully, I freed myself. All done, no more tears. Mommy and Daddy. Baby fixed it all by herself. The ultrasound monitor flickered. Both parents gasped. "Doctor, look at the screen. Did she just move? Did she?" The medical team crowded around, speechless. "Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, this is unbelievable," one doctor stammered. "Your baby just untangled her own umbilical cord." "She's extraordinary," another nurse whispered, "like a little angel." Judy and Leonard stared at the screen, tears streaming down their faces. But this time, their tears were pure joy. Leonard, ever the dramatic billionaire, turned to the staff. "Everyone here gets a bonus, 100,000 each." The room erupted into cheers. Just minutes ago, they were trembling under his threats. Now they were celebrating like they'd won the lottery. One minute he's threatening to torch the place, the next he's making it rain money. Typical. All thanks to me, the unborn miracle princess. Just as the room started to settle, a furious voice thundered from the next suite over. "What do you mean, complications? Get your best obstetrician in here. If something goes wrong, I'll make sure this entire hospital is exposed online." That voice, I'd recognize it anywhere. Vivian Lennox, the washed-up actress who'd been my mother in the last life. I almost laughed once again. Fate was repeating itself. My sister and I were being born at the same time, separated by nothing but a single hospital wall. Even in rebirth, we still couldn't stay apart. Still floating in the womb, I couldn't resist. A smirk curled on my lips as I activated the heart voice skill, aiming my thoughts right through the wall into the next delivery room. "Hey sis, you reincarnated before me, so what's taking you so long to come out?" A pause. Then I added sweetly, Oh, right. Age before beauty. Guess that means I should go first. And just like that, pandemonium broke out next door. Ah, it hurts. That thing is kicking me. Get it out of me now. Bingo. Right on cue. My dear sister was throwing a fit. She started thrashing and screaming like a caffeinated raccoon, clawing and kicking at the walls of poor Vivian's womb. 1 second, she was crying for her mom. The next, she was cursing the baby she was about to become. Meanwhile, I took a deep, calm breath, relaxed my tiny shoulders, and thought cheerfully, "Hang on, Daddy and Mommy. Your baby girl is on her way." With a push, I braced myself with my little hands and feet and launched toward the light. A moment later, I landed softly on the delivery bed and let out the perfect cry, loud, clear, and cinematic. The room went dead silent. Doctors, nurses, and the mighty Leonard Gardner all stared speechless as if they just witnessed a miracle. She's already out. One of the nurses. "Damn, I've never seen a delivery this smooth. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Gardner. You've got an angel." Mom scooped me up, laughing and crying all at once. "Leon, look." The moment I held her, she stopped crying. "She's smiling at me." My father's voice cracked with emotion. He hugged us both tightly. "She didn't want you to suffer. That's our little girl. So thoughtful already." Right then, he named me Lucy Pearl Gardner, heaven's precious pearl. And because my father never did things halfway, he immediately announced the creation of a charitable foundation in my name and transferred 5% of the Gardner Group shares to it. "This is for you, my precious daughter," he said proudly, as if I had just cured world hunger. Inside, I was mentally doing cartwheels. Meanwhile, next door, my sister was losing her mind. Her tantrum got so bad that poor Vivian nearly fainted from the pain. Eventually, the doctors had no choice but to go for an emergency C-section. It didn't take long for word to spread. Soon, the entire hospital was buzzing about 2 deliveries, the peaceful, natural birth of the miracle baby and the screaming, disastrous C-section of the so-called debt collector. Vivian didn't even glance at her newborn. She just waved the nurse away, muttering that she didn't want to see the baby's face. Meanwhile, I was tucked in next to my mother, cozy and warm, drifting off to sleep in her arms. The faint scent of her perfume filled the air, soft and comforting. Then, a shadow fell across me. I opened my eyes to see a pale face framed by soft light, handsome, cold, and eerily familiar. Amber eyes glowed under the hospital lights, sharp and unreadable. I knew that face. It was him, the obsessive older adopted brother, the one who destroyed my sister's life in our last timeline. Every memory came rushing back. From the moment my sister was born, she despised him. She mocked his quietness, his background, his very existence. To her, he was just the unwanted guest in their perfect family portrait. He was the grandson of my grandfather's closest friend. After Grandpa's death, Dad had taken him in and raised him as one of us. But my sister never accepted that. She tormented him through school, humiliated him in front of everyone, and spread rumors that made him a pariah. Piece by piece, she stripped away his warmth until nothing was left but ice and precision. And in that cold silence, he transformed. He became brilliant, ruthless, and dangerously self-controlled. By the time he graduated, Dad had handed him the Gardner Group itself, making him CEO before 30. That's when my sister panicked. The power she'd always thought was hers had slipped away. In her desperation, she made a fatal mistake. She tried to have him kidnapped, maybe worse, but it backfired spectacularly. He survived. She didn't. Disfigured, paralyzed, broken. She never understood one simple truth about men like him. You don't fight a Yandra, you tame him. And this time, that's exactly what I intended to do. Wow, Big Brother is so handsome. I already like him. I lifted my tiny hands toward him, eyes wide with baby innocence, silently asking to be held. Something flickered in his expression. Hesitation, surprise, and something softer. "Hug, hug," I whispered. My very first word. Gasps echoed around the room. "Did she just ask for her brother?" Mom breathed, tears in her eyes. Dad laughed in disbelief. "Lance, looks like your sister already adores you. Go on, give her a hug." Lance froze, caught between shock and uncertainty. But when the nurse gently placed me in his arms, he instinctively cradled me close. At first, his movements were stiff, awkward. Then his touch grew gentle, protective, almost reverent. His amber eyes, once so cold, softened just slightly as he looked down at me. And in that moment, I knew step one of my plan had already begun. Wow, he's really handsome and he's my brother. His eyes are stunning, but why do they seem so sad? Don't worry, big brother. Now that I'm here, you'll never be alone again. The moment that thought reached him, Lance froze completely. His whole life had been spent behind quiet walls, relying on no one, never letting himself need anyone. He'd grown used to silence and emptiness, pretending he didn't care about the loneliness gnawing at him. But for the first time, someone saw him. Someone spoke to the part of his heart he'd buried long ago. His amber eyes softened, the coldness in them giving way to something uncertain, fragile, and alive. Carefully, he placed me back into the crib. Then he unclasped the ivory pendant around his neck, the one still warm from his skin, and fastened it around mine. This was my mother's, he murmured quietly. Now it'll protect you. Warmth flooded through me. I knew exactly how precious that pendant was to him. It was the last thing his mother ever gave him, and he just handed it over without hesitation. Across the room, my parents, Leonard and Judy Gardner, watched us with teary eyes, holding each other as if witnessing a miracle. From that day on, Lance visited me at the postpartum center every single day. And slowly, the frost around his heart began to melt. Whenever I reached out to grab his finger, he turned away quickly, but the faint blush creeping over his ears always betrayed him. Before long, he was mixing formula himself, holding the bottle with careful, awkward hands, as though I were made of glass. From the very beginning, I refused breast milk and drank only formula. Mom carried me for 9 months. She deserved to rest. I also kept to a perfect routine. Asleep by 10 p.m., awake by 7 a.m. And if I got hungry at night, I pressed the nurse call button instead of crying or waking Mom. Naturally, I became the sweetheart of the entire center. When I noticed how much people adored clever, polite babies, I couldn't resist showing off a little. First, I said Mommy and Daddy, then came Miss for the nurses and Ma'am for the other mothers. The place erupted. Pearl's a genius, they'd say. She's talking already. She's barely a month old. While I was busy charming everyone, my twin sister on the other side of the center was making waves of her own. Her features were delicate, her skin pale and flawless. People began saying she looked like a porcelain doll. That was all it took for Vivian, her mother, to rediscover her maternal instincts. She suddenly couldn't stop doting on her, cradling her like fragile treasure and humming lullabies. And to everyone's surprise, my sister started humming back. 2 prodigy babies in one center? The nurses exclaimed. Whenever our eyes met during group checkups, she'd tilt her chin up and give me a look that said, "Watch out, sis. This time I'm winning." A month later, Vivian couldn't wait to leave. She practically ran out of the building, clutching her daughter like a prized possession. I already knew where she was going, to see her so-called benefactor, the man who had been funding her glamorous lifestyle. Just like last time, she thought now that she had his child, she could finally secure her place. But reality hit hard. The man took one look at her, slammed the door in her face, and threw a wad of cash at her feet. "Take the money and disappear," he said coldly. "My wife's family could crush you with a word. Don't make me prove it." Vivian took the money, but she never forgot that humiliation. She let it rot inside her, twisting into something cruel. She poured every drop of that venom into shaping her daughter into the perfect weapon. No freedom, no childhood, no warmth. 4 hours of sleep a night. The rest filled with training, acting, singing, dancing, studying. She drilled me like a soldier, polishing my brilliance until it lost its shine. Even when I injured myself during practice, my ankles so damaged I could barely stand. Vivian saw only an opportunity. While her daughter lay in the hospital bed, she turned on a live stream, milking the moment for sympathy and sponsorships. By the time I turned 18, Vivian looked me straight in the eye and said it was time to repay her. She trained me to survive in an industry built on fake smiles and dirty deals. Eventually, Vivian achieved her dream. She became an award-winning actress, and I became a superstar, but at the cost of my body, my pride, and my tears. So, when Freya, the sister who had literally kicked me into that woman's womb, reappeared years later in a wheelchair and dragged me toward my death, she had no idea what kind of hell I had already escaped. In my first life, by the time it all ended, I was completely drained. Body, heart, and soul. There was nothing left inside me. I didn't even have the will to want anything anymore, not even life itself. But this time, the path I once walked now belonged to my sister. At first, it worked perfect for her. The media adored her, calling her the internet's little angel, and she basked in every ounce of that attention. Meanwhile, I was living like royalty in the Gardner mansion, a pampered little princess surrounded by love, laughter, and endless affection. When my parents got too caught up in their overly romantic displays, I'd quietly escape to spend time with my favorite person, my obsessive yet emotionally reformed foster brother Lance. He never pushed me away. In fact, he seemed to look forward to my clinginess. In his past life, no one ever saw him. He was just a quiet ghost, haunting the edges of the Gardner home. Polite, but forgotten. But now, things were different. He had me, and I had him. I didn't avoid him like my sister once did. I didn't treat him like some lurking threat. Instead, I made sure the world knew how much I adored him. I followed him everywhere, proudly, declaring things like, "My brother's the smartest," or "My brother's the best," until he turned red from embarrassment. On stormy nights, I'd sneak into his room with a pillow in my arms, looking up at him with teary eyes. "Can I sleep here tonight, please?" He'd always try to act serious at first. "You have your own bed," he'd sigh, trying to sound stern, but my baby voice and fake sniffles were too powerful. "Fine," he'd finally mutter, "but stay on your side, okay?" And just like that, I'd curl up beside him, his hand patting my back until I drifted off. In those quiet moments, I always felt something warm bloom inside me, a sense of peace I never knew I'd missed. In the old timeline, he lived a hard life, always walking on eggshells in someone else's home. My sister had made that misery worse, mocking him, isolating him, and even plotting to have him kidnapped when jealousy consumed her. So, really, it was no wonder Lance eventually snapped. No wonder he turned cold and cruel. But this time, I changed the story. Instead of breaking him, I helped him heal. And somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending. I truly cared for him. We were a team now. My brother is the best. I'll grow up and protect him. That thought came straight from my heart. He chuckled softly, an almost foreign sound. "Silly girl, I'm the big brother. I'm supposed to protect you." Time passed quickly after that. By 15, I was outpacing adults in nearly everything. Music, chess, painting, calligraphy, you name it. And of course, I kept my heart voice ability sharp, using it to quietly guide the people I loved. I nudged my father towards smart investments at just the right times. Coincidentally, the Gardner fortune multiplied. And as for my mother, I helped her dodge the trap that had destroyed our family in the last life. Her best friend, who once tried to drug my father and steal him away. Back then, my sister just watched the chaos unfold without lifting a finger. Not this time. Not with me here. In this life, our family only grew stronger, happier, closer. One evening, Dad looked at Lance and me with a proud smile. "With you two in this family, I can finally rest easy." I clung to Lance's arm with a playful pout. "I just want my big brother to spoil me forever. I'll always be his little princess." The look in his eyes that night burned with something fierce and tender all at once. From that moment, he pushed himself harder, taking on more responsibility, building strength like a man preparing for battle. He had a promise to keep. He vowed to protect me for life. Then, one morning, the headlines began changing. Freya's name was everywhere. The media crowned her the new goddess of the screen. Vivian had given her the last name Lennox, and the press couldn't stop praising her beauty and potential. And then fate brought us face to face again. It happened at my 18th birthday party. Freya arrived on the arm of Vevin, wrapped in a designer gown, her hair perfect, her smile polished to perfection, but her eyes, those were lifeless. Still, when she spotted me in my simple, elegant dress, something flickered behind her empty gaze. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted, and she strutted toward me like a queen reclaiming her throne. "Pearl," she said sweetly, though her voice stripped venom. "I heard the Gardners barely care about you anymore. Word is they only have eyes for that freak, Lance. You're just some pity project they keep around." I was about to speak, but another voice sliced through the air, cold, sharp, and dangerous. "Who are you calling a freak?" Freya froze. Her smug smile disappeared as she turned, and all color drained from her face, because standing behind me was Lance. Tall, unflinching, and utterly terrifying. The same Lance who in our past life had destroyed her piece by piece, the one who broke her pride, shattered her world, and left her chained to the very fate she created. She never forgot that, and clearly she never will. Lance's cold eyes locked onto Freya, and the confidence instantly drained from her. I'm sorry, she stammered, her voice trembling. It was just a joke. He didn't respond. Without sparing her another glance, he reached into the inner pocket of his tailored suit and carefully pulled out a diamond brooch. His movements were composed yet hesitant, as if he wasn't used to gestures like this. Leaning closer, he pinned the piece onto my dress. "This is something I made myself," he murmured quietly. "Happy birthday, little sister." For a moment, he looked like he wanted to pull me into a hug. His hands hovered, uncertain, before falling back to his sides. I smiled and bridged the distance myself, wrapping my arms around him. "Thank you, Lance. You're the best." His ears flushed red immediately, and for the first time that evening, his frosty expression softened into something resembling a smile. "Good girl," he said under his breath. "I'll go greet the guests. Mom and Dad said they've got a surprise waiting for you later." As he walked away, Freya snapped. She seized my arm, her tone sharp and incredulous. "That's impossible. Why is he being so nice to you?" I frowned, pulling my arm free. My laugh came out light and lazy. "He's my brother. Of course, he treats me well. Doesn't your celebrity mom spoil you the same way?" Before she could retort, a shrill voice rang out behind her. "You useless child! What are you standing there for? Go make a toast to Director Martin and the others now." Freya froze on the spot, all color draining from her cheeks. She turned slightly, her voice shrinking to a whisper. "Mom, can I talk to Pearl just a bit longer? Just a few words." Vivian's face stretched into a sugary smile, clearly meant for my benefit. I was the Gardner family's cherished daughter after all. "Fine, but don't take too long," she said sweetly before pinching Freya hard at the waist where no one could see. Freya winced, her expression twisting briefly before she forced herself to smile. I hid my smirk. "So, this is your perfect little dream life. You really managed to pick the wrong road in both lifetimes, sister. That takes talent." Freya's face turned crimson with rage. "You're the pathetic one, not me. I'm already earning my own money. I've got fans, people who love me. I have a future." I tilted my head, my tone dripping with mock sympathy. "That's cute, sis. Meanwhile, I was born a shareholder in Gardner Industries. I could stay in bed for the next 10 lifetimes and still have more money than I could ever spend." The words hit hard. I could see it in her eyes. In her previous life, the billionaire never gave her a single share and the family treated her like a disgrace. Peace was something she never knew. "Don't get too smug. Once I win Best Actress, my fans will tear you apart online. I'll crush you." Watching her face, I sighed quietly. "Why is it that every time you challenge me, you forget I'm your sister?" Freya stepped closer, her breath brushing against my ear. Her words came out sharp and poisonous. "Enjoy it while you can, Pearl. That freak of a brother you adore is just pretending. He'll destroy you just like he did me. You'll see. He'll tear you apart and throw you out of the Gardner family." She spat the words like venom, then turned and stormed away, convinced she'd exposed some hidden truth. The worst part was she wasn't entirely wrong. Lance was pretending, and he was dangerously good at it. From across the hall, I watched him blend into the crowd, polite and composed, his glass of wine catching the light. Yet his eyes, sharp and unreadable, never once drifted from me. When the last guest finally left that night, he approached me again, that same faint smile tugging at his lips. Without warning, he caught my wrist and guided me into a quiet, dimly lit side room. "My sweet little sister," he murmured, his voice low and teasing. "You've been quite the naughty girl tonight. Don't you think that deserves some punishment?" His warm, wine-tinted breath brushed my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. The familiar cedarwood scent that clung to him wrapped around me like an invisible net, impossible to escape. But it wasn't the closeness that made me freeze. It was his eyes. Usually calm and composed, they had turned dark, unreadable, and heavy with emotion. My heart stumbled. I turned away quickly. "Lance, what did I do wrong?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, his hand came up, his fingers gently tipping my chin until I had no choice but to meet his gaze. "I'm giving you one last chance," he said quietly. "Tell me the truth. Are you keeping something for me?" I stiffened. My pulse hammered in my chest. I'm not." I managed to say, "Really?" His voice stayed soft, but there was an edge beneath it now. He reached for my hand, placing it flat against his chest. The warmth of his skin and the strong, steady rhythm of his heartbeat made it impossible to breathe normally. Something inside me stirred, a rush of heat, confusion, and emotion I couldn't name. Oh no, this was bad. His chest was way too firm for my sanity. My thoughts spun out of control, dragging me straight back to those nights when I used to crawl into his bed without thinking twice. At some point, sharing a bed had become normal for us, and my overprotective brother never turned me away. He'd even insist on reading bedtime stories like we were stuck in some old picture book. I used to groan in protest. "I'm not a kid anymore. I don't even like those childish stories." But he'd just smirk and say, "You say that, but every night you toss and turn and end up throwing your leg over me." Then to prove his point, he'd grab my leg and lay it across his abs like it was nothing. I'd be left there burning with embarrassment for the rest of the night. If he ever discovered that I wasn't the naive little sister he thought I was, but a woman who'd lived 3 lives and was barely a year younger than him, he'd probably faint on the spot. And honestly, with that face of his, it should be a crime to look that good. Wait, could he have heard that? No, impossible. I was sure I'd muted my thoughts. Still, panic bubbled in my chest. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Then he laughed softly, his tone teasing and low. "What's wrong, little sister? I haven't even started punishing you yet, and you're already trembling." Relief washed over me. Thank goodness. He didn't hear a thing. I'd scared myself for nothing. I straightened my posture and forced a smile. "Lance, I really don't have any secrets. The party's almost over. Can we go back out now?" He studied me for a moment. The smirk faded from his lips, replaced by something faintly sad, but he said nothing, only let go of my wrist. Back in the banquet hall, I suddenly felt the warm trickle of blood. My nosebleed, which I'd been holding back, finally started. Tilting my head back, I pinched my nose just as Freya appeared, champagne in hand, a smug look already forming on her face. "Well, well," she said mockingly. "A nosebleed? Don't tell me your brother actually hit you." Before I could respond, the door behind her opened and Lance stepped out, his expression like thunder. Without looking at either of us, he strode past, silent and unreadable. Freya's grin widened. I knew it. All that brother-sister sweetness was fake. He obviously can't stand you. Her smirk sharpened. 18th birthday and your billionaire parents didn't even bother showing up. Your brother hates you. Tell me, Pearl, does it feel like your entire life's a failure? Who said we weren't here? The voice that cut through the air was deep, cold, and sharp enough to slice through glass. Freya went pale. I turned, and there stood my parents, fresh from their honeymoon, radiating power and presence. The moment my mother saw the blood on my face, she rushed forward, panic flooding her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, what happened? Come here. Let's get you cleaned up." She guided me gently, but her gaze snapped toward Lance, filled with irritation. "That brother of yours. How could he be so careless with you?" As she led me aside, my father's tone dropped to something dangerously calm. His eyes locked on Freya like a predator, sizing up its prey. "Did you do something to my daughter?" Freya's instincts kicked in. Even after 2 lifetimes, she knew fear when she felt it. No, I didn't," she stammered, shaking her head so fast it looked painful. "You've misunderstood, sir." Her hands waved helplessly as she tried to explain. Before she could get far, Vivian appeared, drawn by the commotion. "You foolish girl! What have you done now to upset the chairman? Apologize this instant." Without hesitation, Vivian shoved Freya forward, forcing her into a bow. "Mr. Gardner, please forgive her. My daughter's still young and impulsive." My father's gaze didn't soften in the slightest. "And who are you?" His tone was like ice. "Were you even invited to my daughter's birthday party?" Color drained from Vivian's face. Of course they hadn't been invited. They'd bribed a servant to sneak in. Her mouth opened and closed before she stammered, "Our daughters are close friends. Pearl invited us herself. They were just laughing and talking a few moments ago." Vivian's smile wavered as she shot a warning glance at Freya. She took the hint immediately. She swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir. Pearl and I are friends. She invited me." After a quick change of clothes, I stepped forward, heels clicking against a polished marble, and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "She's lying. I never invited her." The chatter stopped instantly. Every head turned toward me. I stood tall in a diamond-studded gown my mother had personally chosen. The soft lights caught every glimmer, scattering stars across the floor beneath me. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "That's from the Italian haute couture line, right? I heard there's only one in the world. The Gardners must really treasure their youngest daughter." My parents didn't spare Freya or her mother a glance. They each took one of my arms and guided me gracefully to the stage, straight into the spotlight. My father stepped up to the microphone first. "Thank you for joining us tonight," he said warmly. "We're here to celebrate our daughter's coming of age, and to mark this milestone, I'm transferring 10% of my personal shares in Gardner Industries to my daughter, Lucy Pearl, as her birthday gift." The announcement sent a wave of shock through the hall. Dad continued, his gaze fixed on me. "I want her to know that no matter where life takes her, the Gardner family will always be her foundation. She has the freedom to take risks, make mistakes, and chase her dreams because we'll always be here." He smiled proudly. "My darling, you are free, and we will always be your strength." The guests began whispering again. They're all filling the air. She already had 5% from birth, and now she has 15. That makes her one of the youngest billionaires in the country. So, all those rumors about the Gardners neglecting her were false. They were protecting her all along. I smiled politely, though my attention was elsewhere. I activated my heart voice skill, directing it like a laser straight at Freya. "That's right, Freya. The Gardners have always been protecting me. And yes, Lance is pretending too. But he likes me far more than you think." From her seat, Freya looked ready to explode. But before she could cause a scene, Vivian slapped her hard and yanked her up by the arm. "What are you doing just standing there? If we stay another second, we're finished." They turned to leave. But Lance appeared at the side of the stage, calmly pushing a cake cart. He looked at me with that soft, familiar warmth only I ever saw. "Pearl," he said gently. "I made the little figures on top myself. They represent the four of us forever happy together." He lifted a knife wrapped in pink satin and held it out to me with both hands. A lump rose in my throat. My chest tightened. "Will you cut it with me, Lance?" I asked quietly. He nodded, placing his hand over mine. The lights dimmed. Soft music filled the room, and pastel ribbons floated down from above like confetti. Everything shimmered. The air, the cake, our clothes. It felt like a dream. "Their chemistry is unreal," someone whispered. "Wait, he's adopted, right? So they're not related." "Yeah, no relation. And he's already the CEO of Gardner Industries. He's untouchable." I barely heard them. Lance leaned closer, his breath brushing my ear. "Ready, little sister? Let's cut the cake." Was it just me, or was he unusually cheerful tonight? A few hours ago, he'd been tense and quiet in the private room. Still, I didn't question it. That's when Freya snapped. She tore free from her mother and screamed across the hall, her voice cracking with rage. "Don't get smug, Pearl. One day I'll surpass you, and when I do, I'll crush you beneath my heel." Before she could say another word, Vivian smacked her again, this time across the mouth. "Shut up. Are you trying to ruin us both? Move." She dragged Freya away, their heels echoing furiously across the marble until they disappeared down the corridor. I stood at the edge of the stage, watching their figures fade, and even then, I couldn't shake the strange heaviness in my chest. In this life, it might be Freya who spirals worse than I ever did. Back then, I'd bent over backward for Vivian, begged, worked, and sacrificed everything just to earn a drop of affection, and in the end, she still discarded me without a second thought. But Freya, she was born proud and defiant, the kind of girl who refuses to be controlled, and people like that, when they break, they shatter completely. I could only imagine how cruel Vivian would become now that her golden daughter had fallen from grace. The entertainment industry was ruthless. It devoured ambition and left nothing but fragments behind. No matter how passionate or fearless you started, this world had a way of snuffing out that fire until only ashes remained. If it didn't break you, disaster was always waiting just around the corner. I knew Freya. I knew how fiercely competitive she was. If she ever felt herself faltering, she wouldn't hesitate to drag me down with her. That meant I had to stay ahead, always one step faster. The next 4 years saw me studying abroad at university, while Freya skyrocketed. She landed major film roles, collaborated with top directors, and quickly ascended to all-star status. Her beauty and charm captivated everyone, and soon she was both a singer and actress with a dual career. Vivian, who had once dismissed herself as a washed-up nobody, returned to the spotlight, winning a Best Actress award and reclaiming her fame. I documented every red carpet, every glossy magazine feature, every press photo. Freya looked untouchable in each one, her confidence seemingly limitless, but I couldn't help the sigh that escaped me. Even after all her lessons from our past life, she had chosen the same path I had once walked, the endless chase for fame, swallowing every injustice to keep shining. While she pursued the spotlight, Lance stopped pretending. The cold, stoic older brother facade vanished entirely, using just checking in on my little sister as an excuse. He flew out to see me regularly. Every time someone new approached, whether a date, a classmate, or just a harmless flirt, Lance would appear the next day. Polite on the surface, his message was unmistakable. Back off. He no longer acted like a brother. He acted like a territorial partner. Afterward, he'd ask the same quiet, awkward question as if he already knew the answer. Is there anyone you like? Sometimes it made me laugh. Mostly it broke my heart. After everything I had endured in my past life, I felt tainted, unworthy of love. I wanted nothing more than safety, not romance. Lance was kind, but I couldn't believe I deserved him. If he knew the truth of my past, he would never see me the same way. So each time he asked, I smiled and said, "No, I don't like anyone. I don't even want to get married. Lance, would you take care of me forever?" A flicker of disappointment crossed his face, but he nodded solemnly. "I promised long ago that I'd protect you for the rest of your life. That hasn't changed?" With that vow in mind, I made my own promise. I would create something better. A company that respected talent, uplifted artists, and refused to play by the industry's cruel, unspoken rules. For 4 years, I devoted myself completely to training, screenwriting, directing, production, mastering every detail. When I returned home, script in hand, full of purpose, I was ready to build my own empire. I wasn't ready, however, to run into Freya the moment I landed. She was surrounded by fans at the airport, cameras flashing, people calling her name like royalty, even more striking than I remembered. Every move she made was precise, controlled, graceful. She belonged in the spotlight by birthright. She saw me and her face lit up, not with warmth, but with that familiar, smug, poisonous smile. Dragging her suitcase behind her, she strutted toward me, chin high. "Pearl, look at this," she announced loudly enough for half the terminal to hear. "All these people came for me. They'd do anything I say." Her voice dipped into venom. You're just a pretty little accessory the gardeners keep around for show. What? No one to pick you up. Have they finally tossed you aside?" The crowd stirred, whispering. "Wait, isn't that the gardener heiress? Damn, Freya really knows everyone. So what? Being born rich isn't a skill. Pearl can't hold a candle to her beauty and talent. Of course she's our queen. We love you, Freya." The praise only made her straighter, taller, drinking it in like sunlight. Then her gaze snapped back to me, cold and sharp. "Just wait," she hissed. "I'll win Best Actress, and when I do, I'll crush you under my heel." I didn't dignify her words with a reply. Silently, I wheeled my suitcase past her and walked outside. There, waiting at the curb, was a sleek black Maybach, polished until it mirrored the streetlights. Leaning against it, arms crossed like a vigilant guardian, stood Lance. The moment he saw me, his jaw tightened. I tugged lightly at Lance's sleeve, pouting just enough to soften him. "Let's not talk about her today. Just take me home, okay? What did Mom and Dad have the chefs make for me?" The irritation in his eyes vanished almost instantly, replaced by that gentle warmth he reserved only for me. "All right," he murmured. "All your favorites. Let's go home." Back home, I noticed how much had changed during my years away. My father, once a cold and commanding tycoon, hopelessly devoted to my mother, had completely stepped down from Gardner Industries. He had handed the entire empire over to Lance. And what were my parents doing instead? Traveling the world like newlyweds, eating, laughing, exploring, living a never-ending honeymoon. I couldn't help but smile. Who would have imagined that the iron-fisted CEO would trade boardrooms for beaches and wine tastings in Santorini? But what surprised me most wasn't my parents' happiness. It was my father's complete trust in Lance. No hesitation, no safety net, just pure confidence in his adopted son. After a couple of weeks of rest and readjustment, I finally brought up my dream project, investing in a film of my own. The family didn't hesitate for even a second. Dad leaned back with a grin. "Go for it, sweetheart. Whatever you need, we've got you." That's all I needed to hear. I smiled wide and immediately roped him in as the honorary chairman of my new company, Starlight Studios. "Dad," I said playfully, "with you at the top, Starlight's going to burn brighter than anything else in the industry." He blinked, realizing a moment too late what he'd agreed to. But before he could change his mind, Mom pinched his ear and said, "You finally have a chance to help your daughter, and now you want to run. Don't even think about it." And that was that. Both Dad and Lance rolled up their sleeves and got to work helping me find directors and actors for the script I'd been polishing for years. As fate would have it, director Martin West, the same man who had once propelled Freya and Vivian into fame, fell in love with my story. He agreed to take on the project, and Lance personally approved the deal. The fish had taken the bait far quicker than I expected. Now, it was time to begin my revenge. Exactly 1 month later, Vivian and Freya were officially cast as the lead actress and her on-screen mother. They were thrilled. So thrilled, they insisted on throwing a banquet for the entire production team. Dad had no intention of attending, but the second I gave him a pleading look, Mom took his arm and said, "We're going." End of discussion. Naturally, Lance accompanied me as my date. Vivian entered like she was walking the Oscars red carpet. Every strand of hair in place, every jewel perfectly catching the light. Even now, she radiated glamour, possibly outshining Mom that night. Freya, seated conveniently next to me, leaned close with a smug smirk. "Surprise! Pearl didn't think we'd end up side by side again. Did you?" She purred. "My acting's so good. Even that freak Lance believed I was worth casting. The gap between us is shrinking fast. Before long, you'll be back under my heel." I lifted my glass, took a slow sip, and laughed lightly. "Oh, and how exactly do you plan to crush me this time with the same dirty tricks you always use?" Her face went crimson. "You have no right to judge me. You climbed up the same way in your last life. Don't pretend to be pure. We're both playing the same game." I met her gaze, calm and steady. "No, Freya, we're nothing alike. I fought against it every step of the way. You embraced it. Purity and dignity don't come from a spotless record. They come from within. And you don't have either. So if anyone here is shameless, it's you." With that, I stood and made my way toward the restroom. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, the world tilted. My vision blurred. My balance faltered. Freya's hand shot out, catching my arm in a mock gesture of concern. "Pearl?" she whispered sweetly, her tone laced with poison. "Words like that won't save you. Let's see if after tonight you still dare to talk about dignity or innocence." I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My limbs were heavy and unresponsive. Still smiling, she led me upstairs to a private guest room, locking the door behind us. Then she turned, her mask slipping into a twisted grin. Moments later, the door opened again. Several men walked in, led by none other than director Martin West himself. He looked both eager and cautious. "Freya, are you sure this won't come back to bite us?" Freya leaned close and whispered, her voice sharp and cruel. "Relax, Director Martin. After tonight, she'll be finished. And her father, he won't be able to protect himself either." My heart thudded in terror. They weren't just setting me up. They were targeting my parents, too. The men advanced, eyes gleaming with hunger, hands twitching with anticipation. And in the corner, Freya stood with her phone out, recording everything. The next moment, the door burst open with a violent crash. Lance stood there, fury burning in his bloodshot eyes, the kind that could tear through walls. Without a word, he strode inside and sent Freya flying across the room with a single powerful strike. His security team rushed in behind him, precise and ruthless, subduing every man present before they could even blink. I stumbled forward in shock and fell into his arms. My voice trembled as I tried to calm him down. "Lance, it's all right. I didn't drink the wine." Before I could finish, he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. The warmth of it stole my breath. "Pearl," he murmured, his tone rough with emotion. "Promise me you'll never risk yourself like that again. I couldn't stand it if anything happened to you." My cheeks flushed hot, my heart pounding. I tried to look anywhere but at him. Then I gasped, "Dad, go save Dad." Before Lance could react, my father's amused voice drifted in from the hallway. "Relax, sweetheart. Your old man's just fine. Want to know what your dear stepmother's up to now?" Turned out Vivian had tried to drug him too, but my dad, always sharp, saw through it instantly and pretended to play along. Mom had been waiting just outside. When Vivian tried to spring her trap, Mom stormed in with reinforcements and smacked her across the face before recording everything. Vivian's confession, her motive, even the part where Freya convinced her to help. Vivian admitted it all. Freya had promised her that if the plan worked, she'd finally replace my mom as the billionaire's wife. But Freya's ambitions went even further. She wanted my entire life, my name, my place in the Gardner family, even my identity. Her plan was calculated and cruel. Once everything was exposed, she expected my gentle mother to demand a divorce and my father to take the blame. Then, the media storm would destroy me. My father, under pressure, would be forced to disown me. Clean, efficient, final. But one mistake shattered everything. That night ended with Freya, Vivian, and the sleazy director all being dragged off in handcuffs. Only later did I learn the truth. Lance had known from the beginning. He'd been watching quietly all along, protecting me from the shadows. When he realized I was planning to put myself at risk to lure them out, he secretly informed my parents. The three of them worked together behind the scenes, carefully planning everything to ensure I came out unharmed. Dad gave me a proud grin. "You think I'd just sit back and let things fall apart? Please, that calm act was pure theater. So, how'd I do?" Mom rolled her eyes and tugged his ear. "You almost blew our cover. If it weren't for my performance, this wouldn't have worked." Looking at them at everything they'd done for me, I felt the lump in my throat. My eyes stung before I could stop the tears. Lance immediately reached out, wiping them away. "I'm sorry, Pearl," he said softly. "You're angry I kept this from you, aren't you? That I watched you in secret?" "I shouldn't have. I just didn't know any other way." I gave him a playful pout. "Then confess, when did you start spying on me?" He hesitated, eyes dropping. "Your 18th birthday," he admitted. "That brooch I gave you, it had a tracker inside. You were leaving for school overseas, and I needed to make sure you were safe." My heart stopped for a moment. Did he know about my rebirth? About everything I'd lived through before? Did Mom and Dad know too? Would they see me differently if they did? Lance must have seen the panic in my eyes because he stepped closer, his voice calm and steady. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "Mom and Dad only know about Freya's plot. I never told him anything else." He looked straight at me, sincerity written in every line of his face. "To me, you've always been pure and kind, the one person I'd do anything to protect. My only regret is that I didn't find you sooner in the life before this one. Maybe then you wouldn't have suffered so much." He pulled me into his arms and held me close. His warmth seeped through me, steady and grounding. In that moment, I let go of everything. The pain, the shame, the years of silent endurance. I broke down completely, crying in his arms like someone who had finally made it home, and suddenly, everything clicked. That look he gave me in the private room, the way he always seemed to know. It all made sense. Of course he knew. Lance always knew. Whenever I tried to deny it, Lance would give me that quiet, wounded look, the one that made me feel like I just kicked a puppy. He probably thought I was just being kind out of guilt, or that I was pretending to care for some hidden reason. Thinking about it now made my chest ache. I grabbed a handful of his shirt and held on tight, like letting go would make him vanish. My eyes burned, but I forced myself to look straight at him. "Lance," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I really like you. I mean it. I want to treat you well. Not because I owe you, but because I want to. He didn't answer right away. He just smiled that soft, almost shy smile of his and pulled me into his arms. He murmured near my ear. I know. The aftermath came fast. Freya and Vivian were both convicted for drugging and attempting to orchestrate a sexual assault. The story dominated every major news outlet. The directors involved didn't escape either. They were charged and sentenced. In an industry where reputation was everything, theirs was gone forever. No excuses, no redemption arc, just pure downfall. And Lance made sure of it. He bought out the top trending hashtags and flooded every social media platform with a full story. He wanted the world to see what they'd done and who they'd tried to destroy. The public went wild with outrage. Sympathy poured in like a flood. Overnight, I went from a name on the edge of scandal to a symbol of strength and survival. The daughter of the Gardner family who had almost been broken but refused to fall. Then came the fan theories. Am I the only one who thinks Lance and Pearl are way too perfect together? Exactly. No blood relation, and he's ridiculously handsome and protective. I'm all for it. The comments were chaotic and oddly heartwarming. Even Lance, who rarely smiled, couldn't hide a faint curve at the corner of his mouth when he read them. 3 years later, the script I had poured my entire soul into finally reached theaters. It exploded across the box office. Billions in revenue, critical acclaim, standing ovations, Starlight Studios, once a small dream, was now one of the biggest names in entertainment. Dad had fully embraced retirement, spending his days gardening, cooking, and doting on Mom like they were newlyweds again. Mom, on the other hand, had become the family's unofficial manager, constantly fussing over me. She'd say things like, "Don't overwork yourself, honey. You already proved your point. Let the others chase the spotlight for a while." But peace never lasts long in the Gardner family, because one evening, under a sky streaked with gold and violet, Lance led me to the same garden where everything had once fallen apart, and then where everything had started anew. He took my hands, his thumb brushing against my ring finger. "I may not be the most romantic man," he said with a quiet smile, "but what I can give you is everything I have, every heartbeat, every breath. I'm not asking for a promise from you, Pearl. I'm offering mine." Then he opened a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, and clearly made just for me. It wasn't flashy, but it glowed under the light, timeless and beautiful. His eyes stayed on mine as he held it out. "So please," Lance said softly, "let me spend the rest of my life keeping that promise. Will you marry me?" I stared at him, the man who in another life had been cold, possessive, and terrifying, and now, still possessive, still intense, still infuriatingly protective. But this time, every part of him was mine. That day felt like something out of a dream. Lance stood at the end of the aisle, waiting for me beneath an arch of white roses and ivy. The sunlight caught on his suit, turning the edges of his figure to gold. And in that moment, I finally understood this was where I belonged. The tears came before I could stop them, warm and endless. Lance saw, smiled gently, and reached for my hand. His fingers trembled as he slipped the ring onto mine, his eyes soft with emotion that needed no words. When he pulled me close, the world seemed to fade away. My parents cheered from the front row as he whispered, "Welcome home." We were married on a private island Lance had bought in my name, hidden away in the Caribbean, surrounded by turquoise waters and skies, so clear they looked painted. I wore a custom gown designed with my mom with help from one of the top fashion houses. The dress shimmered like starlight, each step catching the light as if I were walking through a constellation. Dad walked me down the aisle, his hands steady, his eyes wet. When he placed my hand into Lance's, I caught the smallest tremor in his smile. Relief, pride, and love all at once, under a canopy of white orchids, surrounded by the people who had stood by us through everything. Lance looked into my eyes and vowed, no matter the life, no matter the world, we'll always find our way back to each other. And I believed him. The wedding went viral within hours. Photos, videos, edits, people all over the world sent their blessings. The internet called it the wedding of the century. But far from the laughter and the music, in a cold, gray prison cell, Freya finally broke. When the news of our marriage reached her, she screamed until her voice gave out. She tried to end her own life, and before losing consciousness, she shouted into the darkness, "I didn't lose, Pearl. Give me one more chance and I'll win." But there would be no next life for her this time. That night, on the balcony overlooking the ocean, the waves whispered softly against the shore. Lance turned to me, his gaze dark and tender all at once. "Pearl," he said quietly, "do you remember your 18th birthday?" I nodded. He smiled faintly, his voice husky and unguarded. That night, when I found out the truth, I wasn't angry. I was relieved because it meant I didn't have to hide anymore. I didn't have to pretend I wasn't completely hopelessly obsessed with you. That was the moment I decided I'd marry you someday. And from that day on, every single thing I did was to make sure that dream came true. I blinked, remembering how people online used to call us the perfect pair, like it had been fate all along. Noticing my expression, Lance smirked. Yeah, that was me. I may have given the idea a little push, fed it to the media, let them fall in love with the thought of us. So, when today came, the world would be ready for it. I couldn't help laughing through my tears. "So, you've been acting this whole time?" He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around me from behind, his breath warm against my ear. "Maybe," he murmured, "but not anymore. This time I finally get to protect you for real." I laced my fingers through his and leaned back against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. And with a smile that came from the very core of me, I whispered, "Yeah, you do."